Hello, I'm Kieran at KWSA English and welcome to our 25th video on English vocabulary. This week we look at 6 words and phrases used on social media. We look at pronunciation, definitions and examples. So let's get started with number 1. Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast, where we go over with you some of the most interesting and important words and phrases found on social media this week. So, once again, we have 6 words and phrases for you to go through the pronunciation, definition, and an example. Okay then, let's get started with number 1. So the first one this week is squats. So what are squats? Well, the definition says this is an exercise which includes the action of bending down and standing up again as an exercise. This is done many times in a row until finished. So now let's move on to an example to learn a little more. The girl decided to start doing squats every evening to help her become more healthy. She loved the feeling after doing her squats. Moving on to the second word this week, we look at the word unearth. Now, what does unearth mean exactly? Well, as always, let's take a look at the definition firstly. So, this is another and more formal word to say that we have found something new. It usually means to find something nice. So let's learn a little more about unearth by looking at an example. The girl was delighted to unearth a new Japanese restaurant in the city. Before she found it, she did not know any other in her local city. So she enjoyed the food in the new Japanese restaurant. The next word we have for you this week is an exotic and interesting one. So let's have a look at the third word for you this week. And this one is flamingo. So what is a flamingo exactly? Well, let's take a look at the definition firstly. This is a pink bird with long legs, which likes to walk in water. These are often found in warm countries and in zoos all around the world. So that's fascinating. So now let's look even deeper into what a flamingo is by looking at an example. The flamingos were walking through the water at the beach. They were looking for small fish in the shallow waters. We're now moving on to the fourth word for this week's podcast. So let's take a look at this. And this one we see at number 4 is gem. So, as always, let's take a look at the definition of gem to get a basic understanding. This is an informal word meaning someone, an object, or place which is really great and enjoyable. The girls often went to their favorite cafe for drinks and snacks. They loved it so much that they believed it was a gem of a cafe. So that's great. And obviously, when you find something really special in your area, then you would call it a gem, like a gem of a cafe. Next up is the penultimate word for this week's podcast. And this word is backstory. So, in the definition, we'll look at the basic meaning of backstory. So, this is the history or background of characters in a fictional TV show or movie. Their past is often written by writers rather than seen on the screen. So let's move on to an example to learn a little more about the word backstory. The fans loved their drama so much that they wanted to learn more about the characters' backstories in more detail. They wanted to do this so they could have an even better understanding of their favorite characters. So we've now come to the end of this week's podcast. And with that, we have the final word of this week's podcast, which is podium. So let's have a look at podium in more detail in the definition. So this is the stand where the first, second, and third placed teams or individuals stand to collect their awards. First place is always on the highest step. So now let's learn a little more about podium by looking at a relevant example. The workers were awarded prizes for their excellent work throughout the month. The winner stood at the top of the podium to collect their prize. Thank you for taking part in this week's lesson. We really appreciate your company. We will be back with more lessons each week to provide you with the most important English words and phrases. Why not check out our website and find out how you can further improve your English with our online self-study courses. We have a free 2-week trial so you can learn exactly how to use our course by the time the trial ends. Feel free to check out our social media feeds to keep up with the latest news. Anyway, thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye!